There are two things that one can be sure of when politicians denigrate the government programs as socialists. One is that they don't know anything about socialism at all, which they probably don't. The other is that they don't know anything about the programs that they're trying to smear. So here comes the representative Elise Stefaniak, who's a Republican from New York, who's the third-ranking member of the House Republican leadership with an especially absurd example of the genre. Marking the birthdays of Medicare and Medicaid, which were enacted on July 30th of 1965, she took to Twitter to celebrate the critical role that these programs have played to protect the health care of millions of families. Then she pivoted to this. To safeguard our future, we must reject socialist health care schemes. The cry of socialism has been patented by the powerful interests that desire to put a damper on progressive legislation for over a quarter century. Al Smith, who was a Democratic candidate for president in 1928, in 1928, Stefanik's remark was particularly incoherent, in part because of the history of Republican opinion on Medicare and Medicaid. Almost universally, they derided the programs as socialism. The Medicare and Medicaid bill placed before Congress by President Lyndon Johnson was not only socialism, it is brazen socialism, declared the Senator Carl Curtis, who was a Republican from Nebraska. During his 1964 presidential campaign against Johnson, Senator Barry Goldwater, who was at that time a Republican for Arizona, asked, "Having given our pensioners their medical care in kind, why not food baskets? Why not public housing accommodations? And why not vacation resorts? And why not a ration of cigarettes for those who smoke and a beer for those who drink?" Ronald Reagan, functioning in 1961 as a mouthpiece for the American Medical Association, had revealed a precursor bill to the Medicaid-Medicare legislation as simply an excuse to bring about what Democrats wanted all the time, socialized medicine. Reagan's AMA patrons were only sticking to a successful script. Their cry of socialized medicine had helped them defeat an effort by Harry Truman to enact a public health care plan in 1945. The AMA also derided Truman and his aides as followers of the Moscow party line. More recently, Senate Minority Leader Moscow Mitch from Kentucky, who's a Republican, had announced that the GOP strategy in the 2020 election would be to present itself as the firewall that saves the country from socialism, which that backfired on them. And did it work? No. This was the election that turned Moscow Mitch from Senate Majority Leader to the Senate Minority Leader. Stefanik, who has been making a name for herself on Capitol Hill as someone who will say anything if she thinks it will bring her advancement, wasn't clear in her tweet what she meant by socialist healthcare schemes. Perhaps she meant the public option, a government-sponsored program to compete with private insurance. The public option was rejected during the debate preceding enactment of the Affordable Care Act in 2010. Though it has legally gained new attention, but Stefanik didn't need to be that specific. Her goal was to place the term socialism out there. Stefanik was using the term as a shibboleth, a code word that's directed at her political base, much as her Republican colleagues have used vaccine passport to demonize the vaccination requirements designated to protect public health, Fauciism to undermine vaccination, or critical race theory to manipulate the education standards. Stefanik didn't expect to be heard by the public at large, and certainly not by Democrats. She was merely sending a signal to her sycophantic base that she was one of them. The effectiveness of shibboleths doesn't depend on an understanding of a particular term's meaning, but in fact, in any such understanding, it would work against its effectiveness as a partisan dog whistle. It's useful to recall that one of the rallying cries against the enactment of the ACA was to keep your government hands off the Medicare. Nevertheless, before looking at the technique's long, discreditable history, we should be reminded that true socialism is defined as a belief that the means of production should be publicly and not privately owned. That encompasses manufacturing plants and their machines and tools. Such conditions imply an economy in which output and the use of labor are publicly directed and social benefits are evenly distributed. Any functioning economy then compromises purely capitalist elements, as well as those that might be labeled socialist, but the programs denigrated as socialist by the American right tend to place private enterprise at their center. That includes the Affordable Care Act, which indicates that all Americans must carry a form of health insurance and subsidizes their purchase by the working and middle class, but it relies on private insurers to provide the coverage. In Medicaid and Medicare, the government sets the price for procedures and services, but it leaves it up to the doctors and hospitals to decide whether to join or not. The American system also recognizes that market capitalism, for all its virtues, has its flaws. Chiefly, that all participants don't enter the marketplace with equivalent power. That's why we have a safety net of social insurance programs aimed at ensuring that nobody is left entirely out of the market. The Affordable Care Act, Medicaid and Medicare, food stamps and child tax credits, the free COVID-19 testing and vaccinations, to name a few. As people have reported before, the branding of progressive programs, especially those proposed by Democrats as socialists, is not a new stratagem. The socialist smear has long since become so common that it's easy, almost too easy, to ridicule. The best example dates back to January of 1936 in a gala dinner that was sponsored by the American Liberty League, a splinter group of wealthy business leaders and old guard Democrats opposing Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal. Its star was former New York Governor Al Smith. He had ran for president on the Democratic ticket in 1928 as a progressive leader, and then thrown in his lot with the party's Wall Street gang. No one was ever quite sure what motivated Smith's his reasoning, whether personal resentment of his former ally FDR or the financial blandishments of his new friends. FDR had a withering opinion of the Liberty League, describing it as an organization that only advocates 2 or 3 out of the 10 commandments, and they say you shall love God and then forget your neighbor. At the League Gala, Smith told his audience, make a test for yourself. Just get the platform of the Democratic Party and get the platform of the Socialist Party and lay them down on your dining room table side by side. After you have done that, make your mind up to pick the platform that more nearly scores with the record, and you will have your hand on the Socialist platform. A thunderstruck FDR remarked to his Labor Secretary that Francis Perkins, practically all the things we've done in the federal government are like things that Al Smith did as governor of New York. They're things he would have done if he had been president of the United States, and what in the world is the matter? But he also had an ace up his sleeve, a speech Smith had delivered during the 1928 campaign, in which he ridiculed the same charge of socialism from Republicans that he now leveled against Roosevelt. The cry of socialism, Smith declared, has been patented by the pauper interests that desire to put a damper on progressive legislation. Is that cry of socialism anything new? Not to a man of my experience. I have heard it raised by reactionary elements in the Republican Party for over a quarter century now. Nearly a century later, the GOP is still at it. The cry of socialism is still used to put a damper on progressive legislation, whether it's requiring the wealthy to pay their fair share of taxes instead of enjoying the lowest tax rates in 50 years, or looking for further means to ensure universal health care. But it's been a tried and true method for decades. But as Stefanik's inept version shows, it's getting a little threadbare. But if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you get notified when a new video comes out, and thanks for listening.